You are living from a story that you didn't really mean to choose. And it assembled itself in the hard moments of your life. For example, when people may have said things to you when you were in a low place. Maybe it was when you were younger and there was somebody of influence that said something. And it has been running your life without you even knowing it. So today, I really want to show you how that happens and how we can trace back a false identity that specifically has been messing with you. Today, I want to show you how false identity happens and how to find out where your specific false identity started. Hey, I'm Jory. Welcome back to the Refinement Room. And in our last video, I introduced the concept of fear. Most fear leads to false identity. It's this constructed version of yourself that has been built. Typically, false identity is not chosen, but it is built over time. Today, we're going to go deeper. And where does false identity start from? And how do you trace yours specifically? When I started to do identity work seriously, I actually had to go back to moments that were not very comfortable in my life. There was a season in ministry that I had treated like a failure, something to recover from, but not something to learn from. What I had found when I actually looked back was a conclusion that I had drawn in a season that I really never revisited. And the message I got was, I am someone whose sense of calling is way bigger than his capacity. That story, that narrative was running rent-free in my heart and in my mind without me even knowing it. This caused me to be non-committal in many different opportunities in my own life. So every risk that I took and every opportunity I approached, I basically had one foot in and one foot out. And I had never once named this as a belief. I just experienced it as my reality. So there's this construction process when it comes to a false identity that we live in. False identity is not chosen, but again, it's built gradually over time when there's been heartache, there's been hard moments, and things that we were vulnerable to believe when we were younger that were not true. And the pattern looks the same. Something happens, criticism, a failure, a loss. And in that moment, especially when you're young and the stakes are really high or there's a lot of pressure, you typically will draw a conclusion. I'm not enough. I'm a disappointment. I'm just too much. I'm someone things just don't work out for. And you see that conclusion ends up becoming a filter that you live your life from. And over time, it's just not a feeling, it actually becomes who you are. In my personal experience, false identity can come in 4 different sources. First, authoritative voices: a parent, a teacher, a coach, a mentor. A critical word from someone like that in your life when you're younger makes an incredible impact. When you're younger, it lands differently than when you're older. And the conclusions that are drawn when you're younger tend to follow you when you become an adult. And a lot of times, it's just never examined. The second source is a major failure that happened in your life. And I'm not talking about just ordinary failure. I'm talking about the kind where it really impacted you and other people. It could have been a marriage. It could have been a business that failed. It could even be a moral failure that happened in your life. In those moments, there is temptation to go down a road that is very difficult to come back from. You could instantly draw a conclusion is that I am a failure at everything that I do. The third is when you're in an environment for a prolonged time and that message of the environment seeps in deep inside of you. Not just a moment, but I'm talking about a season that's in your life. Maybe it was the home you were raised in where the needs you expressed became a burden to those who were around you. Maybe it was a church culture that said you were not spiritually mature enough. So prolonged exposure to those kind of environments creates messages, again, that lives in our mind and in our heart. The fourth source are expectations from other people. Sometimes false identity is not built from pain like we've been talking about, but it could be the expectations that other people have on you. You became what your family needed. And over time, the version that other people needed from you became the version that you actually lived from. So here is how you can tell false identity from your genuine self. So I want you to ask yourself, where did this belief come from? And if the answer is from a moment, a person, or a season that you were in, that is actually worth examining. True identity has its source from the one who created you. False identity comes from what happened to you. We have all heard the stories of people that are out there that put their ladder on the wrong wall. Maybe they were brought up to be an attorney, a doctor, or something of the like, and they had built their identity around the expectations of what other people put on them, such as parents or people that were mentors, or saying, hey, you would be good at this. And what we see, people have giftings, so they actually live out the role and the expectations, the years of study. And even though that person may have the experience, the passion to help people, when they achieve being a doctor, there's something inside of their heart that is still a gaping hole. It's because the expectation from when they were younger is that you're supposed to be a doctor, but maybe God put something else on the inside of that person. Maybe God called them to be a missionary overseas. Now, being a doctor overseas for the work of the ministry, hey, that's fire. But what if God had called that person to be a plumber? Because they use sometimes the same skill set, where one is doing surgery, the other is working with their hands and making sure pipes are put together so there's no leaks. So the expectations of others can really derail us. And it's not until we can identify not only the calling of God on our life and the giftings that help flow into the calling, we must take a look at how God has designed us and who He is and who He says you are. If you can live from a true identity rather than a false identity, you are on fire and you are in flow to make an impact, not only for you, for the people you work with, for your family, and the community at large. So if we can name where that false identity started, it can be the most important beginning to start to live from your truest identity. This week, I want you to do a tracing exercise. I want you to write down the one belief that comes to you automatically. Then I want you to trace it. When did I first believe this? What happened? How old was I? Is this from God or is this just from a moment? You don't need to have the full answer, just the beginning. You do not need to have the full answer this week. Just start tracing. If you're someone that is recognizing that you've been living from a false identity, one of the things that I love to do is personally coach people and get them in community so that we can start walking out the truth of who they are. So I want to personally invite you to click on the link below to either join our community or schedule a one-on-one coaching conversation. I would love to be able to meet with you. So comment below one belief you've been living from and you're starting to recognize it as a false identity. In the next video, we're going to see what God says about you, and I will see you there.